Hey besties, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Zora and I make movie and TV show commentary videos almost every single Saturday. Last week's video was about season 4 of Elite, and today I will be talking about none other than One Night in Miami. So don't forget to like, comment down below, subscribe, and turn on your post notifications so you don't miss a single upload, and let's get into it. So One Night in Miami came out in 2020 and it is based off of the play by the same name, One Night in Miami, and it is directed by none other than Regina King. This is like her first big movie that she has directed so far. One Night in Miami follows One Night in Miami, where Sam Cooke, Muhammad Ali, also known as Cassius Clay, Jim Brown, and Malcolm X after Cassius Clay's victory over Sonny Liston, and it basically explores the forced friendship, their different political ideologies, and just the social climate of the time. And I absolutely love this movie. I've seen it so many times. I've written multiple papers about it from an acting perspective and also a technical perspective, and I think it is one of the best biopic sort of movies to come out in this past year because there have been quite a few, and it was definitely snubbed during awards season. I will say that I am okay. I'm more than okay, actually, with Judas and the Black Messiah getting most of the awards over One Night in Miami. However, I do really love this movie. Like I said before, I've seen it like 1,000 times, and I want more people to see it. And I want to give this movie its flowers because the award season just wasn't doing that. So I must take up the mantle, and let's get into the plot. So let me get a quick disclaimer. I will be talking about these figures as they are characterized in the movie. So when I make comments about the characters, I am not talking about them as the people in real life. I'm going to try to separate the two because I do not know a lot about a lot of these characters. The only person that I know a lot about would be Malcolm X. So I'm going to try to stay in my lane and only stay to the rivers and lakes that I'm used to. So this movie really starts with all these characters hitting some sort of low point. So it starts with Cassius Clay, and I'm going to be referring to him in this movie commentary as Cassius Clay because that is or was his name during the time frame of the movie. Towards the end, he then goes by Muhammad Ali, but just to keep it clear, I'm gonna go by Cassius Clay. So Cassius Clay gets dazed or knocked out pretty much in a boxing match, and that's kind of how we open the movie. From the jump, you can tell that the actor who plays Cassius Clay is having such a fun time, and I really love how we get to see how young he was at this time. Like, I wanted to check and see how young he was compared to everyone else because you could really tell that sort of, not like arrogance in a bad way, but you know, when you're younger, you kind of like have a different way of approaching life, and he was only 22, so that explains a lot. It then cuts to Sam Cooke at the Copacabana, and his performance does not go well. He kind of gets dogged on stage, like, you know, the people aren't really paying attention to him or giving him the respect he deserves, to be quite honest. He quite frankly bombs. So the next character we get introduced to is Jim Brown, and he's meeting an old mentor, and you know, they're just talking, and the mentor is kind of like congratulating him on all his accomplishments and saying how proud he is of him and and how much he respects him as an athlete and what he has done for the community. But when Jim Brown is like, oh, do you need help moving furniture? He's like, you know, we can't allow N-words in the house. So we really get to see how he gets for lack of a better word, humbled. Like, he gets only seen as being either the athlete or just another N-word to these white people. So last but certainly not least, the character we get introduced to finally is Malcolm X, and I really like how we get to see his introduction through his family, through his relationship with Betty, his wife. And this takes place circa him leaving the Nation of Islam, and they're basically talking about how this is going to affect their relationship, their standing with their home, as well as Cassius Clay's possible conversion to Islam. So then we get the title sequence, and it is, you know, the One Night in Miami, but Cassius Clay is underwater and he's boxing for a photo shoot, and I love that photo shoot concept. I think it's so cool. And as he's preparing for this fight, you know, he's being warned by his coach that his investors are getting a little antsy about the fact that Cassius Clay is so close with Malcolm X, and so they're a little worried about having someone so militant be associated with Cassius Clay. So after that, it cuts to Sam Cooke and his partner Barbara, and they're like working on music and they're just like talking and stuff. And you know, they're staying in this like really luxurious hotel. And I really like how these two actors are married in real life. Like, I think that's really cute. Like, I just know them from like Broadway stuff, so seeing them in this movie is like really fun. And Leslie Odom Jr. is such a powerhouse actor. I think he has only gotten better since his launch into stardom, and it's so good to see him do more stuff. And this is honestly probably my favorite role of his so far. There's a lot of splitting between these four actors throughout this like beginning intro scene, because there isn't like one set main character, or at least there isn't in my eyes, and so it really tries to go back and forth between all four of them. So it goes to Cassius Clay and X, and they are now praying together before Sonny Liston's fight, because you know Cassius Clay is starting to convert into being a Muslim. In this scene, he kind of explains why he talks all that mess, because he knows that if he talks all this mess, people are going to pay to see him get humbled, and you know, he doesn't really get humbled, so it just keeps them coming and stuff. And I really like how they included that. But he has not told anyone about him converting so far. His friends do not know, and it has not been announced to the public yet. And so now we're at the boxing match, and bro, just imagine like you're like fighting someone, you're boxing, and then they just tell you that you're ugly. Like, you're like getting your face like blown in, you know, you getting like messed up, and this dude is like, are you getting uglier? Oh my god, I'd be so mad. Now, as the story goes, Cassius Clay does defeat Sonny Liston in this boxing match. You know, they're all celebrating, and Malcolm X is praying, and they're gonna all go back to Malcolm X's hotel room to celebrate. What I really like in this scene towards the end is that there's a shot, because Malcolm X has a camera, and you know, he like does a lot of photography stuff just like for himself, and you get to see through his camera what the fight looks like, or like what the end of the fight looked like, and I thought it was such a beautiful shot. So now we're at the big chunk of where this movie occurs, in Malcolm X's hotel room, and this is where all like the conflicts and the really good dialogue comes from. So you know, they're all just kind of like talking, you know, like making fun of each other. Like, one of the characters tells Sam Cooke that vanilla is his flavor of choice, and you know, Cassius Clay's in the mirror talking about, I'm so pretty, like all this stuff. And it's so fun to see these characters be so jovial and just see their actual like friendship. And so while they're in this hotel room, Cassius Clay does announce the fact that he will be joining the Nation of Islam, and Sam Cooke and Malcolm X are the ones that butt heads the most in this movie. They are the ones who seem to be on complete ends of the spectrum, even though they really aren't. But you know, the whole like conflict between Sam Cooke and Malcolm X, from what I'm interpreting it as, is because Malcolm X wants Sam Cooke to use his platform more to talk about Black issues, because he knows that he has like a really powerful platform. And you know, during this time period in Malcolm X's life, this is, like I said, the only character I can speak to from both the characterization in the movie and from a real life perspective. But this is around the time where, you know, he starts really worrying about his future and his own mortality and all that stuff, and how he is starting to see the fact that he is not going to see much time on this earth. And so that's why he's really pushing him, and so we'll get into that more. And there's a moment where Malcolm X goes out to call his wife and kid and get his camera, and one of the like security guards comes in and is like talking to Jim Brown, Sam Cooke, and Cassius Clay, and he's talking about how he doesn't really regret converting to Islam, because you know, Cassius Clay is still like on the verge of converting, and he's still kind of iffy about it. So Cassius Clay does end up telling Jim Brown and Sam Cooke that he will be converting to Islam, and Sam Cooke has this line where he says to the effect that gangs and religion are kind of the same thing. And it reminded me of In the Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, in the second letter, where he's talking about the concept of who do you belong to, and how he could have belonged to a gang and been kind of like owned by a gang, or he could have been owned by religion, and he chose religion. And so I thought that was really like, it was very interesting how those kind of connect. And so it's very interesting in this movie how the topic of conversion goes with the Nation of Islam, because Cassius Clay is joining while X is on the verge of leaving. And so, you know, X is trying to start his own organization, but he hasn't told Clay yet because he hasn't officially converted. And so we do find out that Clay will be announcing to the media that he will be joining the Nation of Islam the following morning. And Jim Brown also lets it slip that he has been in a movie, and you know, he's been an NFL star, so this is a completely different like deviation career-wise for him, but it's something he really wants to do. And Clay and Brown have this sort of conversation about the concept of being a gladiator and like fighting for the bigger person, like the man, I guess, in this situation, and just doing that for them and, you know, making them money. And Clay is okay with still doing that, but Jim Brown wants to deviate into a different path. So we get to see how all four of these figures are very similar, but their differences are what like genuinely define them. And I really like how that is given a lot of attention in this movie. And so while this is occurring, Malcolm X is calling his family, and you know, he's coming back and checking for bugs and stuff because his paranoia is increasing, as you know, he is not protected via his association with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and as they have had their own rift in their relationship. So it cuts to this scene on the balcony where they all go up there to get some fresh air and to, you know, kind of debrief a little bit. And because I just finished reading X's autobiography not too long ago, it's still fresh in my mind. And so he's bringing up the fact that he's going to see a journalist and starting to like tell his life story because he doesn't think he has much time left. And so I know that that's Alex Haley, and the book that I just finished is the book he's talking about. So that's what makes it really special for me. Also throughout this movie, I keep thinking about the concept of like foreseeing your own death, because it's not just a thing that was apparent in this movie. It was also something that was in X's autobiography, that he did start to see that there wasn't a lot of time left for him. So the concept of that is so terrifying, to know that, you know, in your gut that you're in danger, in imminent danger that you can't really run from. Like, that's absolutely terrifying to me. And you know, in a moment of a little tension between, you know, Sam Cooke and X, you know, Clay like blurts out that Jim Brown made the movie, and it was just like so light and just like funny that he did that, because you know, he is so young. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind when watching this movie, that compared to everyone around him, he is so young. And, you know, they start goofing off with the camera, and they take the camera away from X, and it's like they're trying to get him to like unwind from like the public persona that everyone knows, and trying to like get him on a personal level, because you know, that's like kind of a like defense mechanism for him. And you know, it's just so light, and I love like the camera aspect of this movie, X's camera, but also like the camera work of this movie. I think that's such an important detail, and it's just so nice. And also Malcolm X starts hinting at the fact that he will be taking his pilgrimage to Mecca. And I really like how this movie tackles the different political ideologies and also religious backgrounds of these characters without making it educational, because I feel like it could have easily been like that, where it's like, oh, I'm Malcolm X and this is what I believe, and I'm Sam Cooke and this is what I believe, and I'm Jim Brown, and so on and so forth. But I think that Regina King did a very good job of not having it feel like that, but you still were able to get information about these characters and their ideologies and how like they use that in their walks of life. And you know, like I said before, Sam Cooke and X were the ones who were really getting into it. And Sam Cooke kind of, I didn't like how he was starting to imply that, you know, X kind of just likes to hang around stars and stuff. I don't like that at all. But then X was like, the only person here that white people seem to like is you. So maybe you're the one who's like the odd one out. And it was just messy. It was just a lot of mess from these grown men. And so now we're getting into like my favorite part of the movie. And this is where we really get to see Sam Cooke's perspective on his impact and X's then perspective on his impact. And so he's talking about how he has this voice and stuff that he can use, and he has one of the most powerful platforms, but does not use it in the way that X thinks he should. And you can really tell that he's only pushing him so hard because he believes in him so much. And I think that that's really special, because it's not just like out of spite that he's doing it, but you can tell it's from a place of genuine like care and love for him. And so during this part, Sam Cooke is talking about how, you know, royalties work in music in his case, because he owns his record label and his artists own the masters for their music. And you know, during this time, you know, also now as well, white artists will take Black music and then become wildly successful with it, But in this case, because Sam Cooke owns the royalties for it and so do his artists, they get a lot of money from it. And so he's saying basically, I don't want a piece of the pie, I want the whole recipe. And that's the quote. And it's a really good representation of what his beliefs is, because he wants to be able to work within the already existing system and get economic freedom. And that's kind of where he seeks his sort of liberation. And so while they're in this sort of like heated debate, X brings up this song that came out from this white artist, and he's talking about how it's more revolutionary than anything Sam has come out, and it speaks to the struggle more than anything Sam has put out. And it's just very tense between the two. You know, they're really like butting heads at this point. And Cooke ends up storming out, and X starts speaking about how they're at this point in the struggle that there is no time left for anyone to be on the fence anymore, and none of them can be sort of like wishy-washy anymore. It's gotten far beyond that point, and people need to like be on one side or another. And he's trying to make sure that Sam doesn't go towards the side that isn't towards Black liberation. Once Sam Cooke storms out, Clay goes with him to make sure he's okay. And so it cuts to this next moment, which I really love, between Jim Brown and X after Cooke has stormed out and Clay has followed him. And basically Brown holds X accountable, and he's like, I really wonder if all these light-skinned activists and militants are doing this in some way to compensate for something, not necessarily towards white people, but to Black people. And I really like that he calls him out like that, even if that's not necessarily the case for X, but it's still an important conversation to be had. But to actually like call to attention how in some way it could be seen as trying to compensate for not being completely Black is so important to put in this movie. And I really like how that detail was added, because, you know, X was a light-skinned activist and he was one of the most militant during the time. And so it's really nice to see that kind of be addressed in this way. And Brown was really getting on X, and he was spitting though. Like, he was talking about how white people want like a medal for treating Black people like they're humans. Like, he was really spitting. I'm not gonna hold you. And during this conversation, you can really tell how X like knows that he's on borrowed time, and he ends up getting emotional and starts crying. And during this time, we don't really get to see the conversation, but we know that X explains to Brown the situation between the NOI and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and how, you know, he's not gonna be as protected as he was before, and that sort of colors the next few scenes. And so it cuts to a little scene between Clay and Cooke, and when he's trying to calm Cooke down. And I really like how Clay talks about the concept of power within the Black community, and how it's the power to be yourself and to be complete in your Blackness. And I really, really like that. Even if it is just a little scene, I like how they tackled it. So it cuts to my favorite scene, which is like the Boston retelling scene. And during the scene, you know, Cooke and X start like making up a little bit, and they start talking about the concert that X attended in Boston, which Cooke did not know he went to. And during this concert, the artist who performed before Cooke tampered with his set, and so the microphone went out, and it was going to be another bombing situation. But he ends up doing this a cappella thing where he leads a chant for the audience to do while he sings, and it ends up being a really beautiful scene and a beautiful performance as the sound carries through all the bodies in the theater. And the way that King directed it was that you can really like see how the sound carries and gets absorbed. So by the time it gets to X, he can't really hear it, but like the moment is so important to him to see how much impact he has on his audience and the way that he's still able to connect with his audience. And so that's really like a motivating thing for him to root for Sam. And I also really like how this scene, X is like recreating the stomps and the chants, and it cuts between the two scenes, and it's like Sam's voice along with X and Brown and Clay recreating the stomps as well. And so it goes back and forth between the scene. I really love how sound was used so much. And then X finally reveals how there's a lot of tension between him and the NOI and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and how he will be leaving the Nation of Islam in hopes of starting his own organization. And this scene is really sad, only because I know that this is the beginning of the end of Clay / Ali's friendship with Malcolm X, and it starts to go downhill after this in real life. But you know, we're only thinking of this in terms of the movie. And so after this, Clay and X go out to address the media and talk to reporters, and Brown and Cook are still in the room, and Cook begins to hint at the creation of A Change Is Gonna Come, and he talks about how he started writing the song after he heard the white artist's song before, because it made him upset that he didn't make that song. And so, you know, it gives you like a little like Easter egg for what's to come at the end. And so Clay announces to the media that he will be converting to Islam, and he will be a part of the Nation of Islam. And they go out to like eat and stuff, and you know, they're like celebrating Clay's victory with all these people, and X is taking pictures, and it's the iconic picture. I'll like put it up here with Clay and X, and that's from that event, I am almost certain. And in the scene, everyone is so joyous. However, X is still kind of like lurking around, not in like a creepy or suspicious way, but because he knows that he's being followed, and he's still looking for bugs. And so everyone else is so happy, but like you get to see like the like worry and intense like need to stay hyper vigilant that X is going through. And so now we're at the wrap up of this film, and it starts off with Sam Cooke doing a performance for TV, and he ends up debuting A Change Is Gonna Come. And if Leslie Odom Jr. is gonna do one thing, it is sang, bro. That boy has pipes, and he sounds so good singing this song, and all the songs of Cooke's that he sings in this movie are just so good. So Sam Cooke's singing of A Change Is Gonna Come underscores the last few moments of this movie, and during this time, Cassius Clay officially joins the Nation of Islam and will be known from there on as Muhammad Ali. Malcolm X's house gets set on fire with him and his family inside of it. However, they do all get out safely, but you know this is a sign of what's to come. Jim Brown officially retires from the NFL to continue to pursue a film and movies. So then we get to see X set in motion his autobiography, and we know that he's only really looking at a draft of it, because we know that he does not live to see the publication of this book or its completion. And it cuts back to Sam Cooke singing A Change Is Gonna Come, and then we get to see how X is watching him on TV do this. And so it's a full circle moment of how he was pushing him to make music like this, and now he gets to see him do it. And that's where we leave this movie off. And this movie ends with a quote that I will read to you, and it is a time for martyrs now, and if I am to be one, it will be for the cause of brotherhood. That's the only thing that can save this country. And Malcolm X said that, and he said that 2 days before he was murdered. And that is One Night in Miami. Now, what are my thoughts of One Night in Miami? I genuinely love this movie, and I know on my channel I really only talk about movies and shows that I love just because I want to talk about those more, but this has been one of my favorite movies to come out recently. I've seen it so many times, and I just love it so much, and I think Regina King as a director is only going to get better. That is not to say that this movie is bad directorially at all. I think it's still incredible, but I just know that she's going to get so much better, and this is just like such a high point to start her like big motion picture career as a director. Throughout this movie, I really enjoyed how we get to see these icons as fully fledged humans, and I love how this movie, especially tackling Malcolm X's character, portrays him as being someone who loved his family, because, you know, we get to see in the media Malcolm X as a demagogue or like this militant figure who is so violent and all this stuff, but this movie shows the fact that like he loved his family and like rode for his family to the death and loved his family. And so I really enjoy how we get to see that, and it means a lot to see that. Like I said before, I really like how this movie tackled these different characters' ideologies and how it didn't feel educational. It just felt like this was like organically how they would talk about it if this is how the events did occur, because I do believe that Jim Brown did give insight on either the play, the movie, or both, because he is the only surviving member of this night. This was Regina King's first big film that she made, and it is already so good, and I can just tell with each project she puts out, they're going to get better and better, and to start it off with such a high point is so nice. And all these actors were so good. Like Leslie Odom Jr., this might be one of my favorite roles he's done. The actor who played X was incredible, as well as the actor who played Clay and Brown. I think all these actors carried, and there were moments in which they were the stars, and it really doesn't feel like there is one singular main character, and I think that that works really well for this movie. I love the direction of the Boston scene so much, and the use of sound and this really is one of my favorite biopics to come out recently, and it just really means a lot to see movies like this being made in terms of representation and having it be told from Black creatives on all fronts. And I think that we need more movies like this. And it was snubbed during award season, but you know, the other movies that were coming out, like Judas and the Black Messiah, were so good and also had that same sort of feel of being very important. So I can be okay with all the awards that Judas and the Black Messiah received because they were well earned. Maybe one day I'll make a movie commentary about that one as well, but I would like to be more informed about the content of that movie, because you know, in this movie commentary I can talk a lot more about Malcolm X as a figure, but I would like to be able to speak more about Fred Hampton as a figure. So maybe once I acquire more knowledge about him and that movement, then I can start talking about that more, because I would love to. But those are my thoughts on One Night in Miami. I hope you guys enjoyed this style of video, as it is a more serious sort of video. It's not as lighthearted as, you know, the rom-coms and the fun, you know, action movies I talk about sometimes. But I really do hope you enjoy. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the movie, as well as like, subscribe, and turn on your post notifications so you don't miss a single upload, and I'll see you in the next one.